Okay, no, you're good. I just wanted to go talk to you. There are 5 mics, but one isn't on a speaker.
Okay, do you want this isn't working? This one
That works.
which one is not working?
They're all working. It just doesn't have a stand.
This is no stand and it has a button.
Yeah.
Oh, how do I thought you said one isn't working.
No, they're all working. One doesn't have a stand.
Where's the
And over here, I'm going to...
Kirkland baby lights.
Only the best for you guys. Only the best.
They are the best.
I'm sorry, yeah.
No, they are. I'm not expecting this.
No, I know. They're personal.
I want to, as a mom, I need to do this and they will try it out.
That's right. That's right.
Right now?
It is. Hi, Jed.
I'm so sorry that I put you on a film for your favorite episode. God, it's not yours.
Well, this is going to be a fun crowd of people here. All right.
No, there's one good dry erase marker. There's one good dry erase
I haven't got a selfie with you yet, have I?
Probably not.
I don't think so. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's good.
Add to the collection. Thank you.
You got it.
R is a little hard to read. And the A.
Nice.
I was giving S line. It was giving S line. That's why we're here. Yeah. Immoral support. Immoral.
You need to write them all.
Here. So it was. I need to go. It seems like people are confused.
Is that good enough?
Is that
We're going on every channel.
I didn't do what I wanted to do. I'm just trying to. I'm too far away. I don't want to do it. On my knees. Yeah.
Whatever you want.
However you feel more comfortable doing it.
How'd we do?
We didn't.
We didn't.
No, I think we might have been like 5th or 6th, but at least we got honorable mention in the first round. You
All
know?
right, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not you. Hey. You can. No, we're not going this close for each other. I was going to ask if anyone had not. It's probably not going farther than the TV series, but definitely not that close. Thank you. But I'll remind you. Look at my legs. I'm doing it.
Are you going to sit on the end like that?
Why are you on the far end?
I feel like it's easier to see through a little bit. I don't know.
Are you moderating?
Are you the runner?
Okay.
Yeah, it's whatever. I'm not even going to
They make you the runner for the microphone?
Yeah, I'll run.
Moderator.
The one with the short.
The mic.
The one with
tackles
the.
the miscreants.
What? You can if you want, but I don't know if you can put the microphone on.
Yeah, that might be complicated with the mic.
You don't have to. I'm fine. I just wanted to be able to see that.
Southern one.
It's fine. I want that stuff.
Oh, me too.
Oh!
You
Thank you.
pretty well prepared. Do you need anything?
No, I don't think so.
Do you need anything I can give? I don't have my
I don't want that.
She takes 10s and 20s.
You guys all good?
Yeah.
That was caught on live camera.
Only last 2 minutes.
We'll edit it in post.
Yeah, it's live.
Then you're on to me. You're too quick-witted.
Okay, look confident. Come on. Oh yeah. You're ready to kill it. There it is.
On your knees. That was perfect.
Yeah.
Person, like a comedian who shows up.
Warm up the crowd. I'm not sure we want this crowd to be too excited, actually.
We just want to listen to you talk the whole time.
I heard her pronounce Summerhaj yesterday, and I always want to say it her way now.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
How
Huh?
did you say it?
I can't even repeat it. She's got more of a Summerhaj. Oh, it's beautiful. You got to ask her.
I don't know if Samarol is going to come up today.
It will if you ask her.
Say it. She's got to hear it.
Say it in the microphone.
They want to hear in the microphone. Summerhaj.
Oh.
See?
Semi-crush. Samarol.
You good, Jim?
Samaraj.
It's the new headcanon.
R-A-J.
Now I need a version, an audible version with a French accent.
You
The
know,
entire wheel of time. I would blow your mind.
let's just have Camille read the glossary for us for that minute.
Hello.
Just all the S.
Please silence your cell phones.
No flash photography. It startles the panelists.
Might as well.
Okay, hello everyone.
Hey!
Oh good, you're alive. Welcome to a new turning of the wheel, episodes 105 and 106. In this panel, we'll be discussing the plot and themes of episode 105, Blood Calls Blood, and episode 106, The Flame of Tar-Valon. Let's just start with a quick introduction of the panelists. For those of you who may not know us, my name is Jen Isgro. I am a podcaster on Talk Around Riyadh, the Wheel of Time showcast. Thank you. We specialize in show news, casting, set locations, anything else that comes out about the production. We did do a full review of season 1 with a non-book reader, but we also did a spoiler-filled review. We're usually full of spoilers. And we've been podcasting for 2 years. We basically touched on everything in the book 1, up to including weights and measures. And we've just started going into books 2 and 3 in advance of season 2 coming out. So continuing down the line.
All right, I'm Lance Cowley. I am a fan of 20 plus years. I'm also a professor of gender studies and a proud member of the LGBTQIA community, and so I tend to watch the films as well as read the book through that lens.
Hey everyone, I'm Nikki. I am one of the co-hosts of the Watch Your Feeling show, which is through the Way of the Leaf channel on YouTube. We have a show once a month. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and we talk about mental health stuff within the realm of the Wheel of Times, and I'm also a fan of 20 plus years.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm one of the hosts of Brandland Wheel of Time TV podcast. We talk about everything TV production related, as well as reviews of the show. We do spoiler and spoiler-free versions of our reviews. My background is in film and commercial production, and I'm also part of the Queer Aja, so it's really exciting to dive in and talk about all the themes of the show.
And there's a ribbon. And I'm Camille, or rational nerd on the Twitter, and I don't have any podcast yet. But I've been doing some weird data stuff on the Great Light and Life of Screen Time analysis and this kind of thing. You know, yeah, and I've read the book, started the book 15 years ago, something like that. And I'm gay as well, so
Okay, I know we're probably not going to do a lot of spoilers for the books, but I know we have one person that has not read past Crossroads of Twilight. Does anybody else care, just in case, if we spoil anything before Crossroads of Twilight? Okay. I don't think we're getting anywhere near Crossroads of Twilight, so we're fine. Okay, I know, Jay, you wanted to just give a quick plot summarization of where we are in episodes 5 and 6.
Yeah, so our panel might be structured a little bit differently, just because both episodes 5 and 6 take place in and around Tarvalon. So there's a lot of longer arcs and different themes. So just to ground us in episodes 5 and 6, episodes 5 starts and ends with a funeral. So we start with the funeral after the Battle of Clogane's army, and then we end obviously with Stefan's funeral and a grieving ceremony. So that's a big part of the plot. In addition, we have Matt and Rand approaching Tarvalon. And then, of course, we have Egwene and Perrin traveling with the Tinkers and encountering the White Cloaks. Then in episode 6, also Rafe Just Loves Symmetry, we start in the Hall of the Tower with Logain's trial and Moiraine, Alana, and Leandrin accounting for their whereabouts the past few months. And then it ends, obviously, with Moiraine's exile and everyone journeying into the gates. And there's also a reunion of all of our lovely Aemons Fielders. So I know that was quick, but we're going to jump around and really dig into some of these plots.
Okay, so the first thing we'd like to touch on today is the theme of loss. So across these 2 episodes, we see the few characters in the aftermath and kind of dealing with different kinds of losses in much the same way. So specifically Logain, Stephen, and Perrin. So Mickey, I'm going to go to you first. What about these different stories of loss kind of stood out to you?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think if you watch episode 5, Stefan's story of loss seems like it's the prominent story, right? He's dealing with the loss of Crine and the grief and the breaking of the Warder Bond and the impact that that's having on him and leading him to being in a suicidal crisis. And people trying to come around and support him in that. But there's also these lying stories that have this similar tone of loss, right? We talk a little bit about the camera work that you see as we watch Stefan manage or responding to the loss. You know, even from the very first scene in 105, in the funeral scene, as he's laying Crine's body into the grave, the camera then shifts over to Moiraine and Lan. And so we see them processing, like, non-verbally what that loss might look like for them. But jumping ahead just a little bit, is why this arc is interesting, because then Moraine is thinking about potentially what Lan's, if we're assuming she's thinking what Lan's experience might be if he lost her, but if we go into 106, Moraine is processing loss. She's got this connection. She said early in 105 that, the tower doesn't feel like home anymore, but we see her connection with Swan and being forced into a choice of, like, do I, continue my journey and then potentially lose this connection that I have with Swan, which is incredibly important to her, obviously. And then, of course, we also have Perrin dealing with his grief, too, and this grief has been so heavy on him. And he is, bending under the weight of that grief, and we get to this point where there's another forced choice that Valda puts Egwene and Perrin in, and Perrin in his grief is asking for death. Like, please let me be the one to die under this weight of grief. And as I'm talking, I'm losing our third person we talked about.
Logain.
Of course,
Basically
yes.
the exact same things you're saying apply to Logain as well.
Yeah, so Logain's been separated from his bond, like with the source, and and we see again like that camera shot as they're coming into Tar Valon, and and Logain is just powerless, like literally powerless on his horse. They've taken him, he's no longer caged, he's just sitting on a horse. And then we see him again in 106 in the trial, he is begging for death. Please, allow me to have death rather than this loss, this grief that I'm experiencing. So I think these episodes really play with this idea of how heavy grief can be.
I just have one comment. It's so interesting that you said that he's on his horse, because they put him back into the cage to process him through Tar Valon, and I feel like that's to make them look like more powerful. Like, look, we got him in the cage.
Exactly,
Meanwhile,
it's a show.
It's just all a show, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything to say on this?
Just to jump in, since the heavy theme of these broken bonds and losses is throughout these two episodes, there was a lot of criticism, I think, when episode 5 came out about why are they focusing so much on Stephen's storyline, and we have such a short season, like we don't want to spend all this time on it, but there is just so much unspoken tension between Moraine and Lan about processing what that loss could look like from them, and then like based on how risky their mission is. But then also in the beginning of episode 5, Moraine makes a little bit of a barbed, passive-aggressive comment to Lan about Nynaeve sharing his fires a bit, like along their journey. So I think Moraine is silently also, similarly to the books, questioning of like, could I lose Lan in like a different way because now there's this other woman. So I feel like that's like an unspoken thing she's grappling with, for sure.
Okay. It's also funny because especially in episode 5, I think most of our main cast has to handle with some sort of grief of loss, because we also have on the other side, we have Matt and Rand doing this pact in case one of them is a dragon reborn, saying like, we're not going to let the sisters do that to us. So if that happened to one of us, it's kind of a promise of death. And yeah, it seems that comes back a lot in the episode.
Yeah, Meditations on Death is heavy in episode 5. Yeah.
Tiny bit. A tiny bit.
Yeah. Also just want to say I love like the last scene of episode 5 where Lan is like the chosen sort of avatar to express everyone's grief at the ceremony. And a lot of people thought that was a big departure from the books, because in the books he keeps it very close to the chest. But representation-wise, I thought that was so important to show. Like, he is such a strong male figure, but can let out this heavy mourning and expression of sadness and loss.
And on that note of that scene, especially for new viewers to the show, it was such an emotionally charged scene. I mean, I remember watching it as a group and just seeing people tear up just that raw, visceral emotion. And so I could have done without the tearing the chest out, but I mean, just the testament to the acting chops of these actors, that it was such a visceral show of that loss.
And there's such a contrast with how Lan reacts from when he finds out Stephen's body, where he's like, he doesn't show any emotion, he just kneels down next to him, and there's no tears, there's not any words and anything, he's just there, compared to when he has to express the grief of everyone else, and he has to find this way of, like, it's kind of honoring Stephen and honoring the rest of the people around here by showing, like, expressing the grief for everyone in the room. And everyone in the room is supposed to stay stoic. And that's such a contrast with how we kind of know them. And that was very interesting to me.
Yeah, but I think for me, I read it as fitting Lan's character because at that point it became a duty, right? And we know Lan's statement about how heavy that he is.
Actually, how even say that? Because isn't that modern, like saying that actually Lan never says?
Does he say it in book 1 though? Or does he
No,
say it to
he
Rand
doesn't.
in book 2? Yeah, before he goes in.
I don't remember. But
Yeah.
They're working up to it.
I noticed something else in rewatching that scene. It's that Nynaeve and Moiraine are both crying, but Nynaeve, it's like, I know Moiraine is crying because of the pain she feels through the bond, and it's like Nynaeve's crying seeing Lan sad. But it's just like the way their expressions on their face, you could just like see it so clearly. It is like a great acting job from them. Okay, so another theme we wanted to speak about is representation. So we see a lot of relationships that may have been implied in the books, really brought to the forefront and fully explored in the show. The main one being the relationship and history of Siuan and Moiraine, Soiraine. Lance, I'll go to you first. How did you feel when watching the Soiraine storyline playing out in episode 6?
So Soiraine, it's so encouraging to see this kind of relationship, not just on TV, but especially in the fantasy genre. One of the things that I loved the most about how their relationship was portrayed was the changing power dynamics. It's not very often when you're showing a queer relationship, the writers try to connect to your preconceived notions of masculinity and femininity. So often you have a butch and a femme or something of that nature. And this completely bucks it. And so you've got this beautiful power dynamic of, Siuan in the hall of the tower on your knees. And then, of course, you have that famous line when they're, there. And it's just so powerful. And I know that we have a little bit more to talk about with power dynamics, but one thing that really caught my eye as I rewatched the episode, again, talking about the acting, is the small things that Moiraine does throughout the episode that are really showing how, the breadth of her character and her insecurity. Like, if you watch when she's entering the city, there's this excitement. She's getting excited because she knows that she's almost there to see Siuan. When she's combing her hair right before she visits Siuan, she's almost giddy with anticipation of what she's going to see. And so it's just such a break from that stoic, always in control Moiraine, where she can finally let down her guard, with Siuan.
Yeah, and coming back to the power dynamics, we were chatting, we were geeking out about this whole thing. Of course, it's so exciting prepping for stuff like this. But one of the things that I noticed that I thought was really cool was the costume design in their foray into the hut, right? And that when we start that connection, Moiraine walks in fully covered in all white, right? And so, and Siuan is more exposed in her costuming. She's also wearing white, so they're mirroring each other color-wise, but Siuan is the more exposed, and then her dialogue really reflects that. She's talking about the emotional exposure she felt in the hall. Why did you put me in that position? And then, of course, Moiraine is taking a little more control in that, in the dynamic in the relationship in that moment. And then we kind of have our little time jump, right? The fade to black and time jump. And then we come back and there's a costume change. And people talked about that being interesting, but as they've gone, they're now mirroring each other in red costuming. But at this point, Moraine is more exposed. Her costuming is open on the side. You even see her kind of like putting her hands in the side of her costuming. And she's emotionally talking about being more exposed, whereas Swan's costuming is a little more fully covered. And she seems more in control as she's talking about like, okay, we got this plan, this is what needs to happen next. So again, the dialogue there and that shifting in the power dynamics is just beautifully illustrated.
There's also some interesting things to say regarding Swan's costume, especially because like a motif that was used a lot with the Tyr costume was a paisley, and depending on the scene we see her in, the paisley is more or less present. In her Armelin costume, it almost doesn't appear because she's the Armelin thing, and she's kind of hiding her background. But when you see like the first scene when she appears and she's a bit less, her costume is a bit more open. There's some paisley, but it's present, but not as present as the second costume she has after this costume change, which is full of paisley. It's at a most natural thing because it's what represents her. It's tearing customs, and you see the paisley happening again. It's that scene with Swan, Egwene, Nynaeve, and Moraine, where no, the paisley is on the inside of her costume, and I think that was a nice thing to put in the costuming, to have that sort of how much the tearing motif appears depending on how comfortable she feels with people she's surrounded.
Just to add to that, I think that's such a good point. Like when they're in their intimate fishing hut. Just because there is a point where Swan talks about, you've been gone for so long, and talks about how heavy the duty of Amyrlin is, and she's like, I'm just the seed. And we really learn what it means to be Amyrlin, and this is like probably one of the few times in years where Swan can be just a woman with the person who knows her best and who she loves. And then towards the end, it's like she's already got to start getting ready to just be back to the Amyrlin and say goodbye. So they just pack a lot of subtle things into that scene, and the costuming conveys it as well.
Okay, we also wanted to talk about Leandrin and Moraine and what might have been going on in their history. Does anyone have a thought about that?
I don't know, but I want to know.
Yeah. So say we all.
It's I'm sorry you don't get into someone's personal space like that without it meaning something. At least I don't. I don't know about you all, but I don't.
When she strokes her cheek, there's just so much charged innuendo and history that, I don't think anyone has an answer, but you really want to know. And obviously, it seems like there's some grudge beyond tower politics. So, what happened when they were novices or accepted? Like, maybe we'll get a flashback.
Yeah. We also have, in the theme of representation, the Maxim, Yvonne, Alana relationship, and they're kind of like thinking of bringing Stepan into it and how that dynamic plays out. So, anybody have a thought about that?
Yeah, I really appreciated how it's not made a big deal. That it's just commonplace, everybody accepts it, you can make jokes about it, it's not an issue. And so I think that's one of the things that the series is really doing well, is they're not trying to make representation happen just to make it happen. They're really putting thought into it and making it real world. It's definitely not tokenism. So I thought the whole relationship between the warders has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see because, Alana, Maxime, and Ivan, it's not just one relationship, there's inner relationships. So we're getting to see a lot of Maxime and Yvonne together. And as the seasons go on, we'll see the dynamics, all between all the different ones. But looking at it, taking a step back, they are polyamorous, so they're just so open and are able to extend their love and invite Stepan in, even though it's probably more of a platonic or aromantic situation. But I just thought, I love when Stepan turns to Lan and says, you lose Moraine and see how quickly you know, you jump in with another sister. But it would be even harder, I think, for Stefan to go into such like a relationship with so much history, and they're so connected, to be the outsider after he's still grieving this loss. But it's a little off topic, but just like I kind of laughed in that scene because he says that to Land, and I'm like, Land's already got a woman lined up a little bit.
Maybe a little foreshadowing. Well, and I think it's nice too because you see Stefan recognizing the love, and the connection that they have for each other, right? It's nice you boys have each other. The way that the line is really delivered emphasizes his awareness of like how tightly connected they are.
Yeah. And I mean, this isn't related to polyamory, but something what we really don't get in the books is all these relationships with the warders and learning about their histories and what it means to them. You know, they talk about it a little bit in episode 4, but then in episode 5, seeing how they support one another and learning more about what it means to be a warder beyond just like being strong and training and you know, it's really great.
And I think that's something that Rafe made clear at the beginning. He said, you know, the warder bond is something that's very unique in fantasy. And I agree, that is something that the Wheel of Time has that really is unique. And them spending the time to get you to understand what that warder bond is like, I think it's so valuable to show that kind of relationship that doesn't come down to romance or sex. And it can just be so powerful. So I love the thought that they're putting into making sure that bond is.
And also, it's gonna hurt. Because, we're gonna know a lot of Aes Sedai, we're gonna know a lot of water, we're gonna know people who are gonna become Aes Sedai, and now we have these tensions that, oh shit, something's happened, we're gonna cry.
And I think that was the power of 105, right? That maybe perhaps for book readers there wasn't this familiarity with Stefan and Karene, but that they served to capture like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages worth of depth that we might get as readers in this one episode of, there is a lot to lose in this relationship, but there's also a lot to gain. And again, this part that it's like, and that each warder connection can be different, that it isn't just sexual, that it isn't just aromantic, that it is, that it can be different across the different periods.
I was thinking we definitely needed that because I think at the beginning of the season they spent a lot of time kind of driving home that Maureen and Lan are not in a relationship, and you might think no warders and Aes Sedai are in a relationship. So this kind of showed you every warder Aes Sedai relationship can be different. Some are, some aren't, some are like best friends. Seemed like Stefan and Karene had like a great relationship. So everything kind of was different just depending on the people in it.
Oh, just to piggyback off that, something we learn about the Reds in this as well, because Leandrin has this little conversation with Nynaeve, and Nynaeve says, "Oh, you're Red, you must hate men." And Leandrin talks about, it's not so that we hate men, but even though we're seeing the White Tower and how powerful these women are, Leandrin alludes to the larger power dynamics in the world, and that, men do have a tremendous amount of power, and seems like something maybe traumatic happened in Leandrin's past. But we learn a little bit more about the Red Aja, who are the ones without borders, which I also thought was interesting. Also, I feel like this episode made persimmons like a really erotic food. Leandrin's like, check out the persimmons, and then Alana's eating one in bed.
So, from the audience, how many people, by raise of hands, went out and purchased a persimmon?
We have to talk too about how Maxim was always ready with a snack. Just didn't even look at her. She just held it out. She grabbed it.
The power of the warder bond.
Right. I'm in there I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Please have something ready. Yeah. So I have something else here about the bond, but we kind of touched on a lot of this already. We can kind of go into we kind of talked about Swan and Moraine, about how Moraine masks the bond to Lan when she goes to see Swan. Did anybody want to kind of talk about that?
I get what she does that. It's funny considering that the episode before, we're talking about the loss of the bond, and then like right after she masks it, and Lan jumps to see what's happening because he's like, no, I cannot lose my eyes. And she's like, yeah, but like there's some stuff you may not want to know.
I also felt like it was a bit of a test. Like, I don't think this is too spoilery with the books, but there is a point in the books where she has a conversation and kind of is testing Lan now that she senses there's something budding between Nynaeve and Lan. And so, you know, courtesy-wise, she could have given him a heads up, but she doesn't. And that's also just like another power dynamic. She's kind of like reminding him a little bit, I felt like. And he's like, I'll wait up. Dawn.
Right, is that an order line in that little interaction between them? Does that sound like a situation?
I feel like Maureen is way nicer about Lan and Nynaeve's relationship on the show. She's like, yeah, what's going on with you two? You know, like way more than I ever felt like she was into it in the book at all.
I mean, it's a good opportunity, like in a sense that if there's indeed this other woman, like Maureen is definitely concerned about something happening to her, and that's why she asked Alana like whether there's a way to get rid of the bond. And this is definitely foreshadowing, and I cannot wait to see. Well, no, I don't want to see that, but this is going to happen, and I cannot wait to see that.
This is pessimistic, and I haven't thought of this till now, but up to this point, Maureen could very well think that Nynaeve is the dragon, so she could be like, oh, if you want to date a dragon, that could help me out a little bit.
So I don't know if this is probably in the book, and I just don't remember. If well, this is episode 8. Can I say a thing from episode 8? It's fine, right? If Maureen had died at the end of episode 8, would Lan have felt it if the bond was masked?
I don't know.
Yes.
I'm getting nods. Yes, you would have felt that.
Well, I mean, according to book lore, like, as we understand the book's portrayal of it.
Would be completely different
the
sensation.
exact instant, it would feel the effects.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
the
think,
loss.
like, not her death, but then the loss.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so probably the end of our bond conversation will be when Swan does exile Maureen from the tower, kind of severing their bond for now, and Maureen's bond with the other Aes Sedai. So, and she has that very emotional oath that she swears on the oath rod before she leaves, with that little finger touch, which was pretty good. I mean, if you like that sort of thing. And this is the panel for that. So, Che, what did you think about that scene?
I mean, I definitely cried when she's like, daughter of the river, clever as a pike, strong as the tides. I just thought it was interesting because obviously Maureen is prepared. You know, she's dictated that exile should be her punishment for strategic reasons, but it doesn't. In a way, she's breaking a bond with the tower because she doesn't know if she'll ever return or ever be able to see Swan again. So it was just really moving, but at the same time, just not as a criticism, but just to open it up, swearing on the oath rod was really unexpected. I think people were on different sides of the fences of like swearing to oaths, like this is a no-no, but that just added to the gravity of the situation. And then when they all turned their backs on her, it really feels like, you know, she no longer belongs to the tower.
I think for the Oathword use, a lot of book readers had issue with that, and I get it, but I think it's a nice way to show reader what it means to swear an oath, and how that it involves the power. It's not just, the 3 oaths are not just things that they say, again, they try to apply it, they have to apply it. And so seeing this oath, and maybe how it will, like, because I'm assuming it's going to matter in future seasons, how it will play with what Maureen can do, or what, like, related to Swan and related to the tower. I think that's going to be a nice way to see the implication of swearing an oath.
Yeah, and I think adding to that too, that that shifting in the language she used when she swore the oath. Because when Swan says it, she says, swear to the Emerald Seas. And when Moraine says the words, she swears to Swan. And the oath binds you to what you say. And so what is that going to mean for our story moving forward, that she is sworn to Swan's return?
Big loophole.
Exactly.
And that's one thing that I thought was really cool, because there's two things happening. I mean, they basically almost get married to each other, right? It's like, right? But at the same time, when you consider like Tower politics, but she does it in a way that's so artfully done that nobody knew that. You know, the other people in the hall of the Tower, she lowers her voice, she does it, and it just goes to show, again, how smart Moraine is and all the little ways that she can manipulate things to have such a huge moment for herself, but then she's still playing the game. You know, we haven't really talked about Tower politics, but I thought that was so cool for her to be playing, you know, the ultimate Aes Sedai, while at the same time basically, you know, having this marriage ceremony. So I thought it was awesome.
Well, speaking of Tower politics, these two episodes take us very far from the plot of Book 1, containing storylines that are not explored until later in the series. So the politics and shifting loyalties of the Aes Sedai is something that became a major plot point much earlier in the television series. So Camille, what was your reaction to us kind of getting deeper into the workings and relationships of the Tower?
I'm gonna be honest, like the Tower politics is one of the things that I really liked about the book, so I was excited about that. I understand some folks may not be interested by the political parts, so that's fair. But I think it's been nice because there's been quite a few hints in the previous episodes that the situation in the Tower is not as great as I said I would like it to be. There's a lot of tensions between different Aja. Even in episode 4, like we get Leandrine like talking to other Aes Sedai in the back, kind of we're supposed to be like leading that camp. Now we get Leandrine being this. What do you have more that doesn't start with a B? And she's doing some dirty things right at the hole and screwing up like really regarding Moraine so that's really a highlight. The Amyrlin's power rhino is very fragile. We know it's going to play in later books. And I think it's very interesting that they're introducing it earlier, because that's something that I missed actually in the books. Like, what happening in later books is something that happened very suddenly. Like, we haven't spent that much time in the Tower until suddenly there's this bridge in between, like, sisters. So they're setting it up a bit more. I'm wondering whether we're going to see like a new battle at Avalon, and now that we saw what's the impact of, you know, sister dying, brother dying, oh shit. That's I think that was pretty smart to introduce it earlier, because let's be real, it's going to happen what, season 2, 3? So not that late.
Building off of that, I was just going to say the opening scene in episode 6 where they bring Logain before the Amyrlin, and we get this real sense of Tower politics. Logain's speech, even though it's designed, to hopefully for himself get execution, it does clue us into not only are there politics and fragility within the Tower, but the larger world view is not as pristine. And so we get a real understanding that the Tower itself is vulnerable, and the Aes Sedai might not be as widely venerated. And at this point, we've met the White Cloaks, and then later in the season we'll go to Faldara, and it's not the warm welcome they get in the book. So I thought that was interesting to set up this early, that the Tower is already fragile inside and out.
I like that, but I also feel like in this scene in particular, you're not 100% sure of it, because Logain is just trying to make her angry and saying things that he thinks will put him to death. So I feel like we do see that coming in, and it is true, but it's also like, is this true, or is he just trying to say whatever he can to make her upset?
Yeah.
The White Cloaks are through a bigger threat to the Aes Sedai than they are in the books.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to add to the White Cloak piece, too that there's a phrase, Valda lets us know that he had someone one of the Aes Sedai tell him that the hand movements they use are not even necessary, that it is a crush that they use. And so here we also have one of their enemies, the White Cloaks, know more about the Aes Sedai than the Aes Sedai know about themselves. And so we're setting up this political structure within this world of the Aes Sedai who are powerful, and throughout the season, right, we get hints that like people respect them, but other people don't. And in these couple of episodes, you get some examples of how complicated their system is and how much they might not really know about themselves.
I want to get into the White Cloaks more, but when you said the hand thing, it made me think, I wonder if the more powerful channelers are going to not need their hands. Like we see Logain, and it's clear he's not moving anything. And when Egwene channels, I'm not sure if she moves her hands, but they're tied down.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if that's like a physical way for us to see, like, as these crazy powerful channelers start popping up, like they don't need to do all that stuff.
Because Wilders are better.
And the yellow sister didn't need her hands.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, I feel like it's not just power related. It's really about like how you are taught to do something. And as I have such a rigid structure on how they are teaching with, that maybe it is limiting them, and it's limiting them in the books. It's something that the wise won't make. It's really regularly fun of that.
Well, Camille, I want to jump on a word you just said there. They have a rigid structure, and I think we see that in there, right? There's this like formality and the rigidness, but that rigidness seems to be like leading to some frailty within it, right? Like that rigidness can lead to them being trapped in some ways without flexibility in their system.
Okay, so I want to move on to talk about the White Cloaks, and specifically Eamon Valda, who I love. Not really, but he's amazing. His sleeveless robes are one of my favorite parts of these episodes. So the scene in the White Cloaks camp in episode 5 is full of traumatic experiences and graphic violence against Egwene and Perrin. So Camille, how did you feel about the way that was portrayed?
So that was very interesting because on paper we do have a scene where a black woman is being cleaned by a bunch of white men, and I'm sorry, I see that scene on the paper, I'm thinking, oh, the hell are they gonna like shot that so that it doesn't feel exploitative or like crass? And I think they did a very, like, the directing part of that is very neat in a sense that you really emphasize the fact that White Cloaks are fanatics, and it's pure misogyny. They have rituals that are to cleanse someone's purification ritual, and you really feel like for Egwene, who is basically deprived of the autonomy of her body, they get rid of her braid, and we have insisted on how important the braid was for her. And and they managed to do that without turning it in a sexual way. Like, there's so many media where women's body are used to make a point, like for the number of scenes in Game of Thrones where they're like, oh, that scene is a bit boring, so we're going to make that in a brothel and we're going to put naked ladies behind. Yeah. And it didn't feel that way, it didn't feel sexualized, and that's very interesting because there's so many in the books that is about trauma, and some scenes that are going to be like, I'm rereading the books and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to be that person who turns that into a visual media, because that could turn very badly. Censured. So I'm like, at least if they manage to handle that scene in a decent way, I feel a bit more confident that they will be able to handle the sensitive subjects. So we'll see whether they will be able to do that, but I'm a bit less concerned than before seeing the show.
And I just wanted to say Sally Richardson Whitfield directed both of these episodes, and I just feel like she should be applauded both for like how the intimacy was directed, as well as like these very visceral and traumatic scenes that could go totally wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing, because I think that there was a worry from fans that they would take the Game of Thrones route where it would be nudity, it would be these really disturbing scenes, but they've approached it in a way, I mean, the scene with Egwene being cleansed, I mean, no one can say that wasn't an uncomfortable scene, but they didn't do it through sex, rape, something like that. And the same with the intimacy. I thought that, you know, the intimacy, as gentle as it was, they still had that line on your knees. I mean, that's very provocative without them having to show nudity. I think that is just the genius of the writing and directing.
Yeah, and I was going to add with the scene with Egwene being cleansed, one of the things I really liked about there, when we think about how the mind processes objectification, the presence of a face is really important. And in that scene, the camera stays on Egwene's face. And so she becomes the central piece of it, and the white cloaks are objectified. Most of the white cloaks in the scene are cut off at the shoulder and neck, and so you don't see their heads. And you'll often see, if you look at media or things that are sexualized, it's often women's bodies that are sexualized by removing the head and face in that way. And so I was really pleased that that's where they kept the focal point of the camera.
So I want to move on to, as awful as Valda is, he seems to be following his perversion of the code of the Children of the Light. So Jay, what do you think about Valda's beliefs and how he reconciles the acts he commits with the code he's supposed to be following?
I just appreciated, throughout Wheel of Time, we're always talking about how things are not good or evil. There's a gray area, and so Valda really expands on his philosophy and how he thinks, no one should possess this much power. That's why he thinks channelers are wrong, and why he's so dead set on destroying the witches. But even though, I would say obviously he's a bad person because he seems to get pleasure from torture and really harming other people, but he truly believes that he's doing the right thing under the light, that the light is on his side, and he starts to explain his philosophy to Egwene as a justification for it. So I just thought that was interesting. He's such a good villain in that way. And also I like that he's always eating. He's got a good palate.
The Ortolan is such a classic of something that you should not eat if you want to be a good guy, and it's always make me laugh when I see that word, because it's a French meal, and I've heard about that, and there's French videos that are very interesting about that. But yeah, it's that guy eats weird stuff, and it's supposed to creep us out, and I love it.
I was gonna say too, that the bird that he eats has showed up in a couple other shows, Billions and Succession, for really corrupt rich billionaires. So I'm like, it's a bird for bad guys.
And I'm going to add to the Valda thing that, one of the things that the books are known for is an unreliable narrator, right? And so I think Valda also gives us a nice example. I think we get them throughout this season, actually, and it's really nice to hold this question of, don't believe everything you hear someone say. But Valda has this view of the world, right? But he illustrates for us someone who believes that he's doing right while cutting into someone, literally carving up Perrin's back, and giving them that horrible choice. One of you will die. You make the choice of who to do that. But standing in this concept that he is right by the light, and there's this question of, is he really? Because he gives us this statement early in talking to Egwene where she says, I can't pull the quote right now, but there's a point where he says, do I seem like someone who would stand by my oaths? And then later when Perrin breaks free, when he has a moment of fear, the immediate thing he says is, protect me, right? And so you can see that he believes in the light. He believes that he's working through the light, but his actions very much don't reflect what we might think of as someone being a good person. Yeah.
So it's very Inquisition style, so it's interesting to say the least. And it's also such a contrast because we spent 2 episodes, I think, with the Tuathan, and where we got to develop a lot the way of the leaf, and then we get this way of the leaf fighting against the way of the light, and it's such a contrast. And to have a hand linking arms against someone that wants to impose violence on them and not answering to that violence, it should remind the scene from book readers, and I think that was nice foreshadowing.
Okay, we have a couple of more things we want to talk about, so I want to leave a few minutes at the end if anybody has questions. So really quickly, this scene kind of also portrays both Egwene and Perrin starting to come into their power. So in Egwene's case, she stands up to Valda, she channels, she stabs him, she takes the rings, and that's kind of being mirrored by Nynaeve telling the story to Rand about Egwene when she was sick as a child and calling her unbreakable. So Lance, how did you feel when you were watching that scene with Egwene and Valda?
I loved it. In fact, there was one very particular moment, and when Valda was saying his comment about, do I look like someone who was my... And Egwene snaps, and she says, then do it. And that scene, to me, was picture-perfect Egwene. It was the Amyrlin. She was in control. She went from that young Egwene to just, she was in charge, and she was having none of it. So I thought she did a masterful job.
Okay, so also, Perrin's trauma during the White Cloak scene culminates with summoning of the wolves. So we see his eyes turn golden, but only during the time that he seems to be mentally communicating with them, and we don't hear anything but the wolf howls. So, Mickey, how did you feel about the way this interaction was portrayed with the wolves, and what do you think this means for kind of wolf scenes going forward?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I think I had mixed feelings about it, but I also knew that the wolf brother stuff was I think the hardest thing for them to do, especially for season 1, right? Because there's that conversation. Are we going to have narration? Are we going to hear anything? And so how do we communicate? And so they use the sound design, right? Every time Perrin's in pain, there are wolves howling in the background, and then his eyes turn, I really enjoyed seeing non-readers' reactions to that and recognizing something is going to happen right now. And then he breaks free, but I think this still plays with his fighting his own violence, right? Because he's not the one who does anything at that moment. Egwene's the one who stabs Valda. He just stands there big, right? and then they run outside, and then we've got these great wolves running, back and forth and pulling White Cloaks into tents and stuff. And I mean, kudos to the dog actors on that. I think they did a great job, because we all know, right, that working with animals is hard. We hear that, right? Kids and animals, working in film is really challenging. And so wanting to get these wolves in here in a way where they give the impression that they're working, that they have a purpose. And so we have that moment of that interaction with the wolf barking and just the couple of little lines, right, where Egwene stops, the wolf's barking, and Perrin says that he won't harm us. And Egwene says, how do you know? And then they just run off, right? So, I mean, I love that, the wolf brother part. I love the imagery that is in the books and stuff. I kind of knew we weren't going to be able to get all of that. So I think they did as best that they could in capturing it in those brief moments. But I may not be, my opinion doesn't, isn't the end all be all. I don't know if anybody else had any reactions to it.
Yeah, I think that what's in the book would have been really hard to capture on screen without looking cheesy, and I think I like the way they did it. And I like the golden eyes because it gives us that visual cue, like you said, something, this is when he's talking to them, or this is when they're coming. And
well, the one change we get, right, is that his eyes don't stay golden.
Right.
Right. That the gold seems to be a reflection of his emotional state in the moment. So we're also left with a question of, is that something that's going to stick with him or not? And what do the golden eyes signal to us as viewers? What are we supposed to think about those?
so Rand and Matt also have major moments in these episodes. In episode 5, Rand meets Loyal for the first time. All right. So Lance, what did you think of our first look at Loyal?
Well, first look at Loyal, I was a little dubious. I missed the hair tufts, things like that. But probably 30 seconds into Ahmed's performance, that was Loyal for me. Like, you know, yes, the large teacup eyes, things like that, that would be nice, but it doesn't matter. His performance is loyal, sold it. Like, and I haven't met anybody who, aside from appearance, has not thought that he has done a stellar job as loyal. I loved it.
It's the deep voice. It's the deep, slow voice, and yeah, it's especially the scene where he meets Rand is kind of very close to the scene we got in the book. It's a different city, but it's exact. Like, I think most of what he says is taken almost to the world from the books, and that was very sweet.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said with the fact that, I mean, I don't have numbers, but the amount of screen time that Loyal has in these 2 episodes is actually pretty small, you know? But again, it really stands out. And again, really, for me, my process in watching these shows, having been a reader for so long, is I also needed to check in with people who weren't non-readers watching these shows and see their reactions. And I was just struck by how many people who were just, you know, show-only watchers who were really excited about Loyal, and as we get to the end of the episode 6, finding out that he gets to join the gang and he gets to stick around. You know, he's Brother Book. We now have a new name for him because of this. And I mean, that speaks to the writing and the performance that this character, who only shows up on screen for such a short period of time, we connect to so strongly and want him to join the party.
Okay, we have one more thing to quickly talk about, and then if anyone has questions, we could take a couple of questions. So, in this episode 6, Maureen dramatically heals Matt from the dagger. So, unfortunately, we don't see too much of him after the scene. But, Jay, what do you think this means for Matt in the upcoming season, and do you think he has been fully healed?
I feel that's a loaded question. First, I just wanted to say this is one of my favorite scenes from the episode, visually, the way the healing happens. And also, we don't get that much Rand kind of like early on in the season. So I feel like Rand really stood out as just being like super innocent and so Rand trying to protect Matt, even though Matt's like trying to stab people. I feel like he still has some faint connection to the dagger. And so I feel like that story is not done. I want to believe he's mostly healed, but I don't know, since again we're off book canon, so it's really hard to tell. But I just think it's also like a testament to Matt that he has so much good in him. Moraine keeps focusing on the darkness that's in him, but even like when Len is wrestling with Rand, so Moraine can heal him, he like cracks a joke about Rand, like, you know, he's trying, you know, like he's still Matt. So I think that shows like how strong Matt actually is, even though he's been carrying the dagger for quite a while. But I don't think he's done with the dagger now. But I don't have a prediction.
Yeah, I think they left that as a really big question mark, and I think for myself, I have some thoughts about this, just because Moraine gives us these like breadcrumbs, right? Of, you know, because where Rand is finally thanking her for doing that, for healing Matt, and she says yes, but don't, like, if he gets close to that dagger again, you know, he may lose himself. And that leaves me as a viewer of like, okay, cool, so how we're gonna get rid of that dagger? Let's get rid of that dagger. And we never see the dagger again.
Where does it go?
Yeah.
They just like throw a blanket over it, and I assume Lan takes it and puts it somewhere, but we don't see
know.
it. Yeah.
And we know Fane is lurking in Tarvalon.
Oh yes, yeah, we haven't touched on the fact that Fane.
Well, no, doesn't Fane have it in episode 8?
That's right.
Has it.
That's right. Okay, so he has it. They have to come into contact with each other again, because that story's
We have
not
no
finished.
explanation of how. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, awesome. I'll walk around, I don't care.
Thank you. What an awesome panel, you guys. Great job. This isn't all those deep themes and things about loss and all that are so good. But my question is actually just kind of like, I want to hear each panelist's opinion on the moment when Egwene attempts to channel Valda. What happened there? Because, I've heard a lot of different theories, and I wanted to hear what you all think about that, because it was definitely interesting.
Sure, I'll start. So I do think that her main intention was to go for the straps and free Perrin. I think she was hoping that she could do a little bit more, but I think her intention was to free Perrin.
Yeah, same. That's how I read it, and I was so proud of her. It's my Egwene. She had big plans. She was going to throw this big old fireball and break the straps, and maybe it wasn't quite as big as she wanted it to. But I read it as intentional, doing multiple weaves.
Yeah, I mean, her intention was definitely to free Perrin, but I also think she intended to have more power and was like, oops. I don't think she was so sophisticated that she was like, this will be a distraction and this will, no, but she just, she was successful at one and a little less successful in the other.
I have nothing to hide. She's smart.
My first thought when I saw it, and this is wrong, but I thought she channeled and it went like through him and then hit Perrin's hands behind him and started to, I don't know, that was like my first thought that she did, but then you could see it.